What does Thomas Jefferson have to do with the Brazilian Rebellion and the execution of Tiradentes? That is what we're going to talk about today. Mysteries of the unknown Tiradentes. Tiradentes is a person shrouded in mystery and conspiracy theories. This is the Brazilian attempt to gain independence, which was directly inspired by the American Revolution. It failed miserably, and we're going to look at why. His life is a mystery. Tiradentes. When I ask Brazilians about him, they usually do not have an answer, or they sort of respond with a puzzled, insecure look because there are multiple theories on him and conspiracy theories. Now I'm going to read an excerpt from a book about him. The independence of the United States suggested to a few Brazilians the possibility of freeing their country from Portugal. In 1785, a dozen Brazilian students at Coimbra formed a club for this purpose, and one of them wrote to Thomas Jefferson, then Minister of France, asking American aid. Jefferson was interested, but answered that nothing could be done until the Brazilians themselves had risen up in arms. A like impulse was working in the minds of the poets and their friends at Ouro Preto, which means black gold. A childlike conspiracy was formed whose objective was to found a republic with San John del Rey as capital of Ouro Preto as the seat of a university. A few practical men listened to the plans of the conspirators, probably with a view of turning this disturbance into an account in preventing the government from putting into effect an obnoxious gold tax then being threatened. Among those let into the inner circle was a young sergeant nicknamed Tiradentes. He undertook the task of performing an uprising among the troops. But before anything practical had been done, the whole thing had been given away to the authorities. The conspirators were arrested and taken to Rio de Janeiro, where the frightened governor instituted a formal and elaborate trial and took a fearful vengeance upon the helpless boys and poets. Poor Tiradentes, being without powerful connections, was hanged and quartered. His memory is now revered in Brazil as that of the first martyr to independence and the precursor of the Republic. Gentle Claudio hanged himself in prison after being tortured into confessing implicating his friends Gonzaga and Alvarenga, with several others, were banished to Africa. The South American Republic, Part 1 of 2, by Thomas Cleland Dawson. Republican and separatist ideas had, however, made no headway among the Brazilian masses. Brazil's independence was to come by force of circumstances and not by deliberate national effort. And for a republic, she was destined to wait another century more. Tiradentes, whose full name was Joaquim José da Silva Xavier, was born on April 12, 1746, in the city of São João del Rei, Minas Gerais, Brazil. He was a key figure in Brazilian history, known for his role in the Inconfidência Mineira. So, minor in confidence, or Mineira in confidence. Mineira is the name of the state, and it means minor. A revolutionary movement against the Portuguese colony rule. So Tiradentes was born into a modest family with modest means and trained as a dentist, which earned him the name Tiradentes, which means tooth puller in Portuguese. Despite his humble background, he became increasingly disillusioned with Portuguese rule and inspired by enlightened ideas of liberty and independence. Now, this is what's said about him, and a lot of people don't actually believe this, but this is what's documented about it. In 1789, Tiradentes became one of the leaders of the Inconfidence Mineira, a movement seeking to establish the independence from Brazil Republic and free Portugal's control. However, the conspiracy was betrayed and Tiradentes was arrested in 1789. After a highly publicized trial, he was found guilty of treason, sedition, and conspiracy against the Portuguese crown. Tiradentes was sentenced to death by hanging on April 21st, 1792. He was executed in Rio de Janeiro. His body was then dismembered, and his head was placed on a pole in a public square as a warning to others who might oppose Portuguese authority. The rest of his body was sent to other places. Tiradentes became a symbol of Brazilian nationalism and resistance to colonial oppression. Over time, he came to be celebrated as a national hero. On April 21st is now observed as a national holiday in Brazil, which is the date of this video, and it's known as Tiradentes Day. His sacrifice and martyrdom played a significant role in Brazil's eventual independence from Portugal, which was achieved in 1822. But this independence from Portugal was independence as a separate kingdom. Therefore, it wasn't a movement of the people. It was just based on several reasons. It could have been Napoleon and other things, but it was the king being in Brazil, or a prince and separated from Portugal. According to Nevin O. Winter, the state of Minas Gerais is one of the largest and most important states in Brazil. It is larger than France and contains a population of more than, when he wrote this, it was 4 million, and now it's 19.6 million people. It derives its name from its mineral wealth. For Minas Gerais signifies general mines. So generally it is, that's the general nature of the state. It has within its borders many mines and possesses the oldest gold mine in the country. At this time, when he wrote this, there were no large cities, but a lot of small towns. Now there's a large city called Belo Horizonte, which means beautiful horizon. And a lot of Americans are actually living there that are retired. Much of the state, like many of the others, is still undeveloped at this time, and railroads have not yet penetrated the large sections of it. Today, that's a different story. This state has the honor of having struck the first blow for freedom for the oppressive rule of Portugal. Joaquim José da Silva Xavier Tiradentes is a traditional hero of this event in Brazil. His movement, this patriot, was a traveling dentist, and because of his occupation was nicknamed Tiradentes, which means to draw teeth. He belonged to a club of men who banded together for patriotic purposes, according to him. Spurred by the success of the American Revolution and angered by the attempt of the mother country to impose iniquitous taxes upon the colony, these men met in secret for many months. Tiradentes, in his trip around the country, preached the revolution doctrine, and many new adherents had added to their cause. The wandering dentist was probably not the originator of the various schemes of this body of dreamers, for far abler men than he were among them. But he probably did more to spread the doctrine than any of the others. At length, in 1789, before their plans were fully matured, the plot was discovered and the leader arrested in Ouro Preto, Black Gold, at that time the capital, and thrust into prison in that city. They were imprisoned in dark and damp cells for many months pending the trial and the decision of the matter. Each one of the conspirators was finally condemned to death, but all escaped this extreme penalty through influential connections, except the unfortunate Tiradentes. He was made a scapegoat of the whole affair and was executed in public square of Ouro Preto. On the 21st of April, 1792, his body was quartered and his head exposed in that city. The right arm and leg, and also the left arm and leg, were each sent to different cities. there to be exposed publicly as a warning to other possible conspirators. His house was torn down and the ground salted to purify it, and it was ordered that no building ever again be constructed on that tainted soil. His property was confiscated, his family and their descendants were declared infamous and disgraced even to the third generation. Today the name of Tiradentes is honored all over Brazil. Monuments have been erected to him and streets named after him in many cities. Almost every city in Brazil now that I've been to will have a street named Tiradentes in it. In the principal plaza of Ouro Preto is a marble column upon which stands a statue of martyred Tooth Puller. The pedestal of this monument is the original stone on which he was exposed in the pillory and publicly scourged, on the very spot on which now stands the splendid monument. Many of the places connected with this conspiracy are preserved, and even the spot on which stood the house of Tiradentes, which was destroyed by the order of the government, is sacredly preserved and guarded for the patriotic lesson which it teaches. Also, he mentioned that about this time an incident happened which stemmed the tide of events for a time. Napoleon was at the height of his power and was overturning monarchies with a ruthless hand. So this is an excerpt from Brazil and Her People of Today by Nevin O. Winter. A different author states, struggle for the territory of Brazil had bred a love for the soil and was bound sooner or later to become spiritualized into an aspiration toward autonomy. The Brazilians were not forever to remain the bestas, which means beasts, that the hell mouth of Bahia had called them. So Bahia was one of the main places of Portugal at that time, nor provide luxury for the Maganos of Portugal. The history of colonial exploitation is self-repeated. Spain and Spanish America, Portugal and Brazil, England, and the future United States. Taxes grew, and with them resentment. Yet, as so often, the articulation of that rebellious spirit came not from the chief sufferers of oppression, but from an idealistic band of poets whose exact motives have not yet been thoroughly clarified by historical investigation. Few less fitted to head a separatist movement than these lyric idealist spirits who form part of the Inconfidencia disloyalty group, immortalized in Brazilian history through the hanging of Tiradentes and the imprisonment and exile of a number of others. These men were premature in their attempt and foredoomed to failure, but they lived as well as wrote an ideal that thus formed at once an epic in the national history of the nation's letters. The freedom won by the United States in foreshadowing the French Revolution inspired in them ideas of a Brazilian republic. How surely idealistic was such an aim may be realized when we recall that Brazil's emancipation was initiated with a monarchy in 1822, and that although it had been a republic since 1889, there are a number of serious thinkers who consider that the more liberal form of government is still less a boon than a disadvantage. This is an excerpt from Brazilian Literature by Isaac Goldberg. To the victor goes the spoils and the history too. So whatever happened with Tiradentes, we may never know, because every document, everything was probably manipulated, deleted, his family driven out, possibly driven into poverty, and lost touch with the historical evidence. So we may never know, and it's something that is deleted from the accounts. It's, even in American history, we have stories that are modified and stated in different ways. There are some conspiracy theories that Nathan Hale did not say, "My only regret is that I have one life to live for my country." And Tiradentes was the first martyr for Brazil, according to history. And of course, it's been used in history in order to create this national movement. But a lot of people don't believe it because there is so little information about it. And they believe that since there's almost no information about him, about his life, about anything like that, that the story that he was a scapegoat. You know, they just grabbed him, and maybe he was involved in a little bit, but maybe he didn't have a significant involvement. Who knows? But that prevented them from having to execute these poets who were sons of elite families in the university. And we see situations like that with FTX and other things that happen in the United States. Politicians commit criminal activities, and there's the video of the NBA story of crimes by NBA, but then at the end of this NBA video, they say it's not the NBA, it's actually members of Congress that have committed these crimes. So we have this, we have a society, and it's probable that it could be, and we see these things happen. So we always have to look at history in a lens of who wrote the history and maybe what were the motives. But regardless of who this person was and what happened, he and him being executed, whether he was guilty or not, has made him into a martyr. And it's not the first time that someone who was not guilty was executed and created a great revolution. So there, you know, if you go back 2,000 years, there's a very famous one that a person was not guilty, charged, executed, and changed the world. So the same thing could happen here. Of course, it's a much lesser situation, and it may have had a small effect compared to the other, but it is still a story to reckon with and to take into consideration that maybe people are destined for something. And though it's a terrible way to go, he was destined for greatness, as remembered in history, the little that is known about him. And that's it. So if anyone has information about this and you'd like to add it, feel free to. And thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe. I'll have more videos about Brazil and try to get involved in understanding more of the history of Brazil and information about locations. Some of my previous videos about small towns, colonial Brazil, and other things, feel free to watch and comment and like if you like it. Thanks a lot, and have a great day. And this will be posted today on Tiradentes Day. Thanks for watching.